I never imagined I'd be the type of woman caught off guard by her own cravings. For most of my life, I was the quiet strength people leaned on, the dependable one. The woman who got things right, who carried grace like a second skin. I had a husband who adored me, a home that felt safe, and a sense of self I thought was unshakable. But desire doesn't knock, it waits. And when you're tired, distracted, or aching for something you can't name, it enters without permission. My name is Helena, and this is the story I promised myself I'd never tell. Not because I'm proud of it, but because telling it means admitting I tore apart the very life I worked so hard to build. I crossed a line I can never step back from. One moment opened a door, and behind it was a version of me I didn't recognize. One who stopped asking what was right and just reached. If you've ever felt something that made no sense, but still pulled you closer, stay with me. Because the moment I chose to stay in that kitchen instead of walking away, it all began to crumble. They say some people are born nurturers. If that's true, I was one of them. I've always believed in fixing what's broken, not just objects or routines, but hearts, conversations, people. I was the kind of woman who sent birthday cards early, kept Band-Aids in her purse, and remembered everyone's coffee order. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present. Victor and I met when we were both still figuring out who we wanted to become. He was steady, the kind of man who didn't make promises unless he meant them. I fell for him during a storm, the literal kind. A campus blackout, shared umbrella, warm laughter under cold rain. From that night forward, we didn't drift far from each other. Marriage came quickly, quietly. No grand gestures, just two people who knew they were better together. We built a life that was quiet but full. Sunday mornings in pajamas. Dinner on the porch when the breeze felt just right. Long drives with no destination. But there was always one empty space we couldn't fill. We tried. Hopeful doctor visits turned into calendar dates we stopped mentioning out loud. Each negative test whispered something cruel. We mourned silently, then together, then silently again. Infertility has a way of making you question everything, even the love that's still standing. We didn't stop loving each other. We just learned to carry grief without letting it consume us. And so, after enough time passed, we opened our home instead. Not out of charity. Not because we were saints, but because we still believed in family, even if it didn't arrive the way we expected. That's when Lucas came into our lives. Lucas had a quiet way of being everywhere. Not in a demanding sense. He didn't storm into rooms or fill the air with chatter. He simply lingered, just enough to be noticed, but never enough to be questioned. He started helping with the groceries before I asked. Standing at the sink while I prepared dinner, drying dishes with care, even though he didn't have to. At first, I thought nothing of it, though he was just settling in, grateful to belong somewhere. But there were moments, small ones, when the air felt different. He'd hand me a bowl, and our fingers would touch a beat too long. Or I'd be laughing at something Victor said across the table, only to glance over and find Lucas staring, not absent-mindedly, not like a boy distracted, but with something searching in his eyes, something focused. I told myself I was imagining it. Victor worked longer hours now. A promotion had stretched him thin. He still made time for us when he could. Date nights when we remembered, sleepy smiles in passing. But life had shifted. The days were faster, louder, and lonelier in strange pockets. Lucas filled those spaces with quiet consistency. He noticed things Victor didn't anymore. If I had a headache, he'd bring me tea. If I was late getting home, he'd be waiting by the porch light, headphones in, pretending not to be worried. I convinced myself it was just kindness, that he was finally trusting me. But one afternoon, I caught him watching me fold laundry. Not in a casual way. His eyes moved from my hands to my face, then stayed there, unblinking. I turned away quickly, pretending I hadn't noticed. That was the first time I felt a strange flutter in my chest. And I hated that I didn't hate it. It had been one of those long, quiet evenings. Victor was out of town for a business seminar, and the house carried that particular silence only absence can bring. No clinking of keys at the door, no familiar footsteps upstairs, just stillness. I'd finished cleaning the kitchen and was standing at the sink, staring out into the dark backyard, letting the warm water run over my fingers. There was something oddly calming about the routine, the scraping of plates, the hum of the dishwasher, the scent of lemon soap. I didn't hear Lucas come in. I only noticed when I turned and found him standing there, barefoot, hair tousled, hoodie sleeves pushed up to his elbows. He looked unsure, but not afraid. There was something steady in his eyes. "You need help with anything?" he asked, voice soft, almost cautious. I shook my head. "Just finished." He didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the counter across from me, watching the bubbles slide down the inside of a glass I hadn't rinsed yet. "I like it when it's quiet like this," he said. I nodded, unsure of what to say. He wasn't wrong. The house felt softer without the rush of routine. He stepped closer, not much, just a foot or so, but enough that I felt it. "I made dinner last night," he added. Victor didn't notice. There was a pause. I turned to meet his eyes, and something caught in my chest. That look again. Intent, locked in. Not boyish, not hesitant, focused, like he wanted me to understand something he couldn't say out loud. "I noticed," I replied. He smiled, just slightly, and then he reached out and brushed a crumb from my shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but his hand stayed there. I didn't move. After that night in the kitchen, the rules stopped mattering. We didn't talk about what happened. No apologies, no explanations, just a shared look when we passed in the hallway. A heat in the air that never quite settled. It began with small things, moments no one else would have questioned. He'd stand too close while reaching for a plate. I'd laugh too hard at a joke meant only for me. We moved through the house like it belonged to us alone, like the air between us held its own secret language. I told myself I could stop anytime. But when Victor returned, I felt like I was watching my own life from the outside. He kissed my cheek like always, asked about the garden, and told me about the seminar. I nodded, smiled, even laughed in the right places. But I could feel the space between us. Wide, cold, untouched. That night I lay next to him while his breathing steadied into sleep. My body faced him, my mind didn't. The next evening, Lucas brushed my hand while passing behind me. I should have flinched. I didn't. We were alone again. Somehow, it kept happening that way. And then, in the dim hallway light, he pressed his lips to mine, like it had always been allowed. I didn't pull away. It happened on a Wednesday. Victor was supposed to be working late. A last-minute meeting with out-of-town partners, he even called to let me know he'd be home past midnight. I believed him. I had no reason not to. So when Lucas walked into the living room after dinner, his eyes meeting mine across the couch, the weight of that moment felt inevitable. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. Every stolen glance, every whispered memory of that first touch had been building toward this. The television played in the background, forgotten. My heart was louder. He crossed the room slowly, his footsteps silent on the rug. When he sat beside me, I didn't move. His fingers brushed against my arm, barely there, but it was enough to light a match I'd been pretending didn't exist. He leaned in, just as he always did. Only this time, I met him halfway. The kiss wasn't urgent. It was quiet, intentional, the kind of kiss that didn't need to explain itself. And then we heard it. Keys at the door, the deadbolt shifting. Lucas froze. I stumbled back, lips parted, hands trembling. The front door creaked open, and there was Victor. Briefcase in one hand, confusion in his eyes. He didn't say a word. Victor never raised his voice. He didn't ask for explanations. He didn't accuse or demand. He simply placed his keys on the hallway table, glanced at Lucas, then looked at me like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. And then he walked upstairs. That night, he slept in the guest room. The next morning, the silence said everything. He made coffee like always, black, 2 sugars, poured mine without a word, left it on the counter, and got dressed for work. But he didn't kiss my cheek. He didn't ask about my day. He didn't look back when he left. 2 weeks later, papers arrived in a plain envelope. There was no dramatic confrontation. No screaming in the kitchen or threats thrown between rooms. Just a signature line, a pen, and a date that marked the end of what we'd built. I signed without reading it twice. Lucas tried to stay. For the first few days after Victor left, he hovered in the hallway, unsure whether to knock or walk in. He brought me tea, folded the laundry, and sat at the edge of my bed while I stared at the ceiling. But every time our eyes met, there was something missing. A weight pressing on both of us, that neither of us could lift. One morning I woke up and his room was empty. Just the bedsheets, folded, Closet cleared, door left ajar. People ask if I regret it, they expect a simple answer. Something clean, but nothing about this story ever was. I regret the harm. I regret the silence that followed. I regret the way Victor looked at me that night, like he'd lost something he thought was his forever. But do I regret feeling alive? Do I regret being seen? After so many years of being invisible in my own home? That part is harder. Lucas wasn't just a mistake, he was a mirror. He reflected back the version of me I'd buried under years of schedules and routines and pretending I didn't want more. More attention, more closeness, more than what life had narrowed down to. That doesn't make what we did right. Not even close. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't hold pieces of him in my memory with tenderness. He was never mine to love like that, but for a brief moment I did. Now the house is still. I've filled it with volunteer work, quiet walks, and letters I never send. I see Victor sometimes in town. He nods politely, nothing more. His eyes no longer carry warmth, just a polite distance. I can't blame him. Some damage doesn't make noise. It just settles in and stays. I used to think love could fix anything. If someone finally saw me, really saw me, then maybe I'd stop feeling like I was always one step away from being left behind. Helena saw me, not the version I pretended to be. Not the kid who learned to stay quiet and keep moving. She looked at me like I mattered, like I belonged, and I clung to that feeling. Too tightly. I told myself what we had was real. That the lines didn't matter if no one else understood us. But now I see it for what it was. I was young, she was hurting. We both crossed a place we should have respected, and even if we cared for each other deeply, the cost was far greater than either of us could afford. Victor was a good man. I didn't know how to look him in the eye after that night. I left because staying would have broken whatever pieces were still holding together. I've tried to start over. New town, steady job, no explanations, just silence and routine. But some memories follow you. Not loud, just steady. Like the way certain songs still make me pause, or how I sometimes wake up thinking I hear her voice in the next room. I don't hate her, but I hate that part of me still wants to go back. Some fires don't burn out, they just burn differently. This isn't the kind of story you retell at dinner tables or write in journals tucked away for your grandchildren to find. It's the kind you bury beneath layers of distraction and hope time forgets. But forgetting doesn't erase the weight. I live in a smaller home now. Fewer rooms, fewer reminders. I keep no framed photos from those years. Not out of spite, but because sometimes survival means starting with nothing familiar. I no longer wait for closure. That's the lie we tell ourselves, that healing comes with neat conclusions. It doesn't. It comes in slow mornings. In learning to sit with your own silence without flinching. In knowing there's no one left to lie to. There's no moral ribbon to tie around this. No lesson that makes the pain worth it. But maybe that's the point. Some choices follow you. Some love stories aren't meant to last. And some versions of ourselves only show up once. When everything breaks. But if you've ever stood at a line you weren't supposed to cross, and crossed it anyway, then maybe you understand. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just ask that you don't look away.